Welcome back to the 7th part of the SD-Branch from Scratch video series. My name is Mitchell, and in this video I will cover creating the firewall rules for our SD-Branch location. I'll create some simple rules between a corporate device and a bring your own device, and make sure that we limit the communication between those particular devices, allow certain web categories and that sort of stuff. So in the meantime, I've created a few more VLANs on this particular branch location. So I've added a management subnet, a corp, a bring your own device, and a dedicated VLAN for the instant APs. And I've also taken the chance to redistribute those particular VLANs into the SD-WAN overlay. So if you've missed the previous videos on how to do that, please check out those particular videos. That's all explained in those. And now we just can take off with creating the firewall rules. And if you take a look at the rule set, how that would turn out to, for example, block communication between a bring your own device and a corporate device, that will be a subnet to a particular host or a subnet ID to permit or deny that. But bear in mind that we would have to define this for every branch location. So for example, if you have 200 branch locations, you would need to make certain rule sets and apply them to all these particular branch locations. And the way this is done within the Aruba SD-Branch solution is that we allocate a role to a particular device or a VLAN, and we can then define an object stating that, for example, always a particular VLAN and then the host offset, so the .2 of that particular VLAN should always be, for example, the corporate server. So this allows you to really get rid of the IP space of a branch location, which doesn't really matter anymore. And at this point, we can just say on a high level view, define these ACLs without any knowledge of the underlying subnet of those particular locations, which is also really handy if you need to create ACLs, but also need to modify them. So just a little bit more about the policies being applied on these branch gateways. A computer or a user role on the LAN will never hit the WAN ACL. So this WAN ACL is only for traffic from the controller to the internet or any destination on that particular ACL, or the internet to the branch gateway. And the same applies for the LAN policy. So if an employee would like to talk to the camera, the employee role and with that attached the ACL would determine if that is allowed to the camera. But the same if, for example, a camera would like to initiate traffic to the employee would return traffic back, but based on its ACL on that particular employee role. Now, we can make such simple ACLs, but also with the net destinations, we can determine overrides to say that, for example, a management network is always VLAN 20. And a particular server on the branch location is always located on VLAN 20 with an offset to .10, for example. And in order to apply these policies, we can apply policies or ACLs onto an interface. So this can be a physical interface or a VLAN interface. But in terms of the SD-Branch LAN side, it is recommended to untrust a particular VLAN on a trusted LAN port, and just to make certain user VLANs untrusted. And this means that as soon as a VLAN is untrusted, that a session is created for those particular devices. So when I talk about devices or users, what I really mean is a MAC address, which is then created in the user table. And what we can do additionally is create or tie that particular untrusted VLAN to a AAA profile to do some additional checking in terms of authentication. So we can perform MAC authentication, but also .1x authentication. This is not something that I'm going to cover now, but just to be aware that this particular video will only show the concept of an untrusted VLAN with user entries within the user table without any additional authentication, which will be a subject for later. So to be more precise about the ACLs that we're going to configure for the roles, I will create a bring your own device and a corporate role. I've already added two devices in these two VLANs. and we're going to determine that both devices will be allowed to perform DHCP or have some sort of communication between one and another. So this means that the bring your own device can only access the corporate server, which is under the corporal, is then denied to any other local destinations. So, for example, it cannot access the guest network or the management network or the data center for that matter, and then just block sport websites and then allow internet access. And similar to that, the corporate role will be allowed to have a corporate server communicate to the bring your own device, but then no further communication to the bring your own device group, to allow the communication to the data center and then just allow internet access. So this is everything in respect to the firewall rules that we're going to configure in the SD-Branch network. We're back in Central, and navigating to the gateways, I'll show you the VLAN interface that I've just created on this particular branch gateway. On the LAN side, you'll see that the respective VLANs that I've just shown you are also defined over here. DHCP pools are present, and we already have devices in these specific VLANs. So VLAN 10 will be the management VLAN, or the corporate VLAN, I should say, and VLAN 12 will be the bring your own device network. So now I'm going to go to the group configuration. So this is really a cool thing that we can define such high-level policies over all branch locations. And navigating to security. So what I'll do is create two new roles. The SD-Branch corporal, and then a respective bring your own device. The next thing that I'll do is create a policy for each respective role. As you can see, these two devices, so the bring your own device, the 10.20.12.2 and the 10.2, and they can just ping and reach out to one another. And we're now going to create some additional ACLs, so we'll make sure that that's not possible anymore. So the specific ACL to deny such traffic will be user. So this means that the source will be the SD-Branch bring your own device user to the destination user role. SD-Branch corp will be denied. Like so. And we can do the same for our corporate as well, to make sure that these corporate devices can also not access or communicate to the bring your own device group. So now that we have these specific ACLs defined, I'm going to go to the roles to add these ACLs to the role. And just to make sure that we do have some other type of connectivity, I'm going to add an allow all onto these roles. And this is just a predefined allow any or permit any ACL. Now, in order to make sure that these ACLs are actually applied to these particular clients, I'll head over to security and then AAA profiles, because we're going to make a AAA profile without any authentication. So SD-Branch Corp with an initial role of SD-Branch Corp. Now that I've created these specific AAA profiles, it's time to apply them to the policy. And over here, we can see that currently these particular VLANs are trusted, but we need to make them as untrusted for the VLAN number 10 and number 12. So what I'll do is I'll apply the AAA profile policy to make sure that these specific users will fall in the right role. And now that they have the right role, I'll head over to the interface to untrust these specific VLANs. So that will be 10 and 12. So now we have the untrusted port, which is all good. And as we can see now, the communication has stopped. So these devices cannot communicate to one another anymore. But for example, the device could still access internet destinations. So let's take a look at the firewall to see what is being blocked. And over here, we have ICMP now being denied because we have a specific user role or user SD-Branch to SD-Branch Corp to be denied. So now that this is done, we'll add the additional ACL entries like specified before to make sure that, for example, port 80, the web server, is still accessible from the Bring Your Own Device clients to the corporate server. But then any other destinations will be denied, and that, for example, sport websites are also blocked. Because if I take a look at the Bring Your Own Device user and try to ping the data center, that is still accessible. So this is something that we want to prevent. So going back to the group configuration, we're going to create a few net destinations, and a net destination can be referred as an alias. But in the ACL terms, it's still referred to as a net destination. So you can find those under security and then aliases. And there will be a network alias. I'm going to call this RFC 1918, and this RFC determines the private IP address spaces. So there will be 10/8. And I'm going to define this because of the, we want to block specific traffic from local users to local destinations for the Bring Your Own Devices. And now that I've created this particular net destination, I'll also create a net destination for the corporate web server. So I'll call this SD-Branch Local Corp. And this will be an override for VLAN, host, with an offset of 2. So always the .2 of VLAN 10 will be the web server. So now that I've created these specific net destinations, it's time to apply them within the policies. So within the Bring Your Own Device group, I'll determine that this particular user can access the alias SD-Branch Local Web Server on application HTTP. And that this particular user cannot access sport websites. So then deny the destination to alias RFC 1918. For this particular user, and then have a permit all which was already in that specific role. And this can be, for example, also added in its own policy, so you can define internet only, so you can redefine that within the corp role as well. So I need to change this in terms of the order. And this will now already be applied to this branch gateway within less than 20 seconds. So as you can see over here, this particular bring your own device user cannot access the web server anymore. Taking a look at if we can access this local corporate server, we can still access it. And we could verify which ACL was present for this to be permitted. Let's see if we are also denied for accessing a sport website, sportingnews.com. And this is also denied. So this is everything that we need for our bring your own device role. Let's take a closer look at our corporate role, where we can define that because that is currently an allow all. Let's now also limit the communication between our corporate and our bring your own device. So I already have this specific rule set to deny that particular traffic, but we also want to make sure that our web server is still able to communicate to the user role of the bring your own device group. So we can create that like that within a service of HTTP to be permitted on position number 1. And the ACL that we also need to apply is user role to the SD-Branch local web server, since that will be the particular ACL that's going to be present for when bring your own device users will access this particular corporate server. So that source will be the SD-Branch bring your own device role to destination, and that can be the local web server to be permitted. And I'll set this as the position number 2. So this will make sure that the web server can initiate traffic to the bring your own devices, but also really communicate back when the traffic is initiated by the bring your own device group, like so. The only thing that we need to do now is create a DHP to allow DHP to be received to these specific users. So for that, I'll create a new rule, DHP ACL. Now that I've added this additional policy, we can then add it to the role. So making these additional policies can then be applied to the roles, and this can be based on your preference to make certain ACL policies specific to web content filtering or application throttling, that sort of stuff, as long as you can then use it for multiple roles, for example. So this will be my SD-Branch DHP ACL. And I'm going to add this before the SD-Branch bring your own device, so like so. So let's try to reinitiate some firewall sessions. So this seems to be working in order. And let's take a look at our clients in Aruba Central itself. Because now, since the users are in the user table, we should see these particular clients under the client user table. And we can take a look at these particular users when they were added into the system, which applications they have been using, but also really important to see the sessions of the firewall session ACL. And here, for example, we can also see that the SD-Branch corporate user has the user role that we've just added. So this looks to be all good and in order. This particular traffic was permitted, and this is the basic way of adding firewall visibility and security onto a branch network. And that's a wrap for now. This was the 7th video of the SD-Branch from Scratch series, and in this video I've covered the configuration aspects of the firewall rules, the notion of roles, and the advantages it brings with respect to traditional IP-based ACLs and firewalls. In the next video, I'll cover the port-based tunneling with dynamic authentication and authorization by ClearPass. Per usual, I hope you found this video informative. If you want to receive updates and would like to see more of these videos, like and subscribe, and feel free to leave any questions or comments below this video.